World Health Organization has commended China's swift response to the COVID-19 outbreak, saying it likely prevented hundreds of thousands of cases in the country.
Our assessment is that this approach, what we'd call an all-of-government, all-of-society approach with very old-fashioned tools in some ways, has probably definitely averted and probably prevented at least, tens of thousands, but probably hundreds of thousands of cases of COVID-19 here in China, which is an extraordinary achievement and so important.
A team of WHO experts led by Dr. Bruce Aylward has inspected various parts of China, including Wuhan. At a joint news conference with China's National Health Commission, Dr. Aylward said recent data supported a downward trend in the number of new infections, which he says is attributable to China's, quote, most agile and aggressive containment efforts in history. He also warned the world was not ready for a major outbreak. The latest figures out of Hubei, the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak. 68 new fatalities, slightly down from the previous day's figures. There are also nearly 500 new confirmed cases, which brings the province's total, that's Hubei, to more than 64,000 cases and more than 2,500 deaths. Elsewhere on the Chinese mainland, 9 cases have been confirmed, a positive sign, as that is the first time a daily infection record has entered the single digits. 71 added to the death toll, that's also a 2-week low. Here you can see the progression of the COVID-19 outbreak in China. The outbreak appears to have slowed down in the past 2 weeks or so. And let's talk through the latest on the situation in China. We're joined in the studio by our Beijing correspondent, Olivia Xiong. You're following that press conference this morning. Olivia, I take it was largely about cutting red tape, reducing bureaucratic measures so Chinese business and the economy can get back in step.
Yeah, and it's just continuing that narrative that we've been hearing in the past few weeks, following the standstill somewhat, if you would call it that, that we've seen businesses come to during that Chinese New Year period when the epidemic hit, and the prevention and control measures that have been put in place. And today we saw authorities saying that, they have to put themselves in the shoes of the enterprises and think of how to address some of the practical issues that businesses are facing so that work can resume. And one of the issues that businesses typically face in China is the amount of red tape and long procedures to be able to produce certain goods. And authorities are saying that they are trying to address this given this special situation that they are in. They are implementing online registration for registration of enterprises to get operation licenses as well, and also trying to simplify some of the procedures to reduce the examination and approval time and cost for licenses and certification, and including also for enterprises that have shifted their production to goods that can be used to fight this epidemic. I mean, here we are talking about protective suits, disinfectants, masks. Authorities are saying that they will be given, more fast-track approval in this sort of green channels that have been set up. And the third, also they say, is for urgent matters and supplies. With these emergency supplies, that they will be fast-tracked as well, and technical assistance will also be given to them so that they can get production up and running. But another thing that also came to light during this news conference was that this experimental drug that we've been talking about by this American biotech firm Gilead Sciences has said to be effective in treating COVID-19. The WHO has said that it is one of the drugs right now that they think may have efficacy. And currently this drug is being tested in China. It's undergoing clinical trials, and authorities today said that we should have some results of that in about 2 days' time.
All right, let's return to the theme of this conference, this reduction of red tape, speeding up certification, speeding up all these procedures that allow businesses to get back to their usual operations. Now, I sense a tension in the narrative now between the need to maintain epidemic control and yet not letting that stymie business and economies in China. And possibly one can interpret what happened in Wuhan yesterday as a reflection of this ongoing tension between needing to get back to normal and yet not letting your guard slip in terms of guarding against the epidemic.
It is a bit puzzling about, when we think about what happened in Wuhan yesterday. In the morning, we saw authorities say that they were relaxing some of the restrictions. Non-Wuhan residents who showed no symptoms or did not come into contact with infected people, authorities then said that they would be allowed to leave the city, because if we remember, the city has been under lockdown since the end of January, and most people have been not been allowed in or out of the city. But then a few hours later, we saw another notice from Wuhan authorities retracting that statement and saying that, the earlier notice was no longer valid and that the announcement had been made because, the appropriate approval was not sought from the right leaders. And so a miscommunication, or it's hard to know what exactly went down, but the officials are saying that those who released the announcement would be reprimanded. But it does seem quite contrary to what President Xi Jinping has said in his earlier speech. They are saying that, number one, the priority is still Wuhan and Hubei province, where the number of cases still continues to grow, and that is the hardest hit area. That has to be of focus. At the same time, they are saying outside of Hubei, and as we saw today, only 9 new confirmed cases for the rest of China, and that certainly, I think, will help in its push to get more people back at work.
Oh, thanks so much for that. All the details as usual from Olivia Xiong, our correspondent in Beijing, joining us here in our Singapore studio.